Were you ever taught as a young child how important it is to speak clear and plain, especially when you're on the phone to somebody, because it's really important? Well, today I have a cute little story to tell you about the day that I learned this lesson. Friends, my name is Lisa. This is my channel, Raised on the Moon. And I'm so glad that you stopped by today to visit with me on my front porch. I hope you've got a nice cold iced tea or maybe a lemonade, and let's chat a while. I want to take you back to a long time ago down an old dirt road alongside the railroad tracks to a little house with a young girl and a mom and a dad. A farm. The little girl was me. We had a farm, and it was probably, I would say it was probably in the fall of the year. I was about fifth or sixth grade, somewhere about there. My dad had decided that we needed some money for Christmas. Now, we were a poor family. My dad was on disability, and he was a farmer. My mom worked part-time at a local laundromat and some other places that mom worked. So money was always very tight. When you live on a tight budget, you get paid once a month. You have to make your money stretch. And a lot of times, there's not money for extra things. So I grew up learning how to create ways to make a living, make money. And I remember this fall afternoon, Dad had decided that he needed to raise some money. He had 5 children. I was the baby. My other brothers and sisters were already grown. And there were grandchildren, a couple grandchildren in the family by this time. But we still bought. Mom and Dad loved to buy Christmas for everyone. It was a special time in our life. And Christmas and holidays, birthdays were special. We had had some unexpected things to take place that year. The water pump had went out. We had to replace that. So Dad had decided that he was going to sell some of his cows. Now, he called the local newspaper. This was when you had to call the newspaper and put in an ad. There was no internet. We didn't have anything like that. So everything was done, through a newspaper. If you had something that you wanted to sell, you either called the local radio station, and on Saturday mornings, a lot of times they would have the swap and shop. And if you remember that, give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment about the local swap and shop. Maybe they had one in your local town. Well, Dad had decided to call the local newspaper, and he told the lady that he had 3 cows for sale. Now, it's really important that I tell you a little bit more about my father, because if I don't, you won't quite understand the story. Dad had a speech impediment, and he didn't talk very plainly, and he didn't talk very clear. That was the first problem. Now, I understood Dad, and most everybody else understood my father because you were raised around him, and you understood Dad's language. But if you were talking to Dad on the telephone, or you just met my father, you would not understand my dad. Now, some of the local townspeople would laugh and tease, about my dad, and say that he sounded like he was from Louisiana. Well, my dad was not raised in Louisiana, but that's just the way Dad spoke because he was an orphan when he was young. So my mom always said he was tongue-tied. I don't know why we did not decide to make that phone call instead of him, but this is when the story got funny. Dad called the local lady, put the ad in the paper, put the phone number, and I'm sure he drove up to the newspaper place and paid the bill. Well, the next evening when the newspaper came out, the phone started ringing off the hook. Most of the time, at that time, I would have been about 12, 13. So I talked on the phone all the time. So I thought it was my girlfriends calling me. And I ring, 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 and I'd answer that phone, and I'd say, hello, and they'd say, we're calling about the free cows. Okay, all right. Well, first couple of times, I didn't pay no attention. So I said, hold on a moment, and I'd holler, hey, Dad, they're calling about the cows. You know, so Dad would come, and he'd pick up the phone, hello, in Dad's language, because it didn't sound like that. And they would say, I'm calling about the free cows. And Dad would say, there's no free cows. There's free cows. And they would say, you know, I could hear this, oh, you know, and they would say, well, the newspaper said you had free cows. I don't have free cows. And he slammed the phone down. Well, Dad would no more than get to his recliner, and the phone was ringing again. Ring, 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 ring. And I'm in the kitchen. Hello? We're calling about the free cows. I said, Dad, it's another call. They're calling about the cows. Oh, Dad make his way over to the phone. You know, this is when you had one phone in your house, and ours was by our front door. And the cord was about that long, so it wasn't very long. So Dad had to come over there, and he'd pick up that phone, and he'd say, hello, because that's the way he didn't say hello. He said, hello. And so they would say, they're calling about the free cows. They want to come and see the free cows. And Dad would say, I don't know what you're talking about. There is no free cows. I have free cows. Dad could not say 3. When he said 3, it came out free. So he'd slam that phone down, and again, he'd no more than get to his recliner. Ring, 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 ring. I'm over here. Hello? We're calling about the free cows. We want to come and get the free cows. So I didn't know what was going on, you know. Dad was cussing, mad. I didn't know what was going on. So I called. I'd say, hey, Dad, they're calling you again about the cows. So he'd get back over there, and he'd say, hello. And they'd say, we want to come and get the free cows. I'm telling you, after about the 3rd or 4th call, my dad hit the roof. He had it. He said some unkind words to these people, if they could understand what he was saying. I understood, because I understood Dad's language perfectly, but no one else did. And so he cussed them and yelled at them, said he didn't have no free cows. And he said, blankety blank, 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 I don't have free cows. I have free cows. So then the phone would ring again. And he'd say, Mama, you go talk to him. Well, when Dad couldn't speak and they couldn't understand, he would get Mama on the phone. So Mom would get over there, and she was answering the phone. And she'd say, no, I'm sorry, we do not have free cows. My husband has, we didn't put in the paper for free cows. We have 3, not free cows. So there was a big mix up, and this went on for hours, all evening. I'm telling you, our phone never rang so much ever in our entire life, because the whole county thought my dad was giving away free cows. We finally had to take the phone off the hook because it bothered us so bad. Well, this isn't the end of the story, because my dad had to call, the newspaper came out. So he got the newspaper and he looked up, and absolutely there it said free, F-R-E-E, cows, and his phone number. It said free cows for sale, but the phone number. So big mix up, big typo error. So Dad calls the paper station the next day. And I think it was a Saturday, because I was home from school. And he gets the local lady in the classifieds. She answers the phone. And Dad is giving her all kinds of H-E-L-L. He is giving it to her. He does not have free cows. This was a typo error, and they need to fix it. I have free cows. And then he would say, 1, 2, free. And the lady was still mixed up. So then he'd say, Mama, get over here and get on this phone and talk to this lady and set her straight. So Mom would get over there and she talked to the lady at the paper station, paper office, classified. And she said, I am sorry, my husband has a speech problem and we do not have free cows for sale. The ad should have said 3. THREE cows for sale, and our phone number. So we had to take our phone off the hook Friday night, all day Saturday, and most of the day Sunday, because it took time for the new paper to come out with the reprint on Sunday. So that's the lesson that I learned at a very young age, was that it is very important. If you can't speak slow and clear so that someone can hear you, then you need to get someone else on the phone and make that phone call, because you'll end up having free cows for sale like our house. Thank you, my friends, for joining me on my front porch. And if you have any lighthearted memories of farm life, rural life, funny family stories, leave me a comment. I would love to hear them. Thank you for joining me on my front porch, my friends, and I look forward to seeing you again for another family funny blooper.